Yeah, good evening, everyone. Hope I'm audible and everyone could see my screen here.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
So, where are we, guys? I think in the last class, we were looking into the library concepts like how do we create an external library? What are the problems we face if we go with an external library? So, those things we are looking into. We haven't given the solution using the closure. I mean, we are about to go to that, right? So, yesterday we created one of the library here. Okay, something called as math operation sum JS. This is a JavaScript library which will be created by some third party person, and you guys need to make use of that guy and get the advantage of the library. But the problem what we have is, once the library guy is developing the library, he might use some lot of global variables or a lot of predefined, some user defined methods, etc. Now you as a developer, when you are making use of the library, the restriction what you will be having is you cannot define the same variable names or the same methods names what they have already defined, because if we use them, it is like a duplication of the code, or like same variable is going to come and there is some data disturbance is going to happen. So that is what we have seen in the yesterday's example, right? So we were using the same count variable. So under our app.js, we were using the count equal to 0, and mistakenly even the library guy is also using the same variable name called as count here. Okay. Now the problem what happening is the data is getting clashed, because if you put a question that was math operations is a separate JS file, my app.js is a separate JS file, how come the clash is happening? Because when we go into the HTML, when we include external JS files or external CSS files, the data from the third party will be dumped into the local machine. Okay, it is not referring the file, but it is dumping the file content into the same file. So for the web page, it's all the same page, it's all same single page. That is the reason the problem. That is the reason the problem is going to come. So how do we avoid this? So everybody is so clear with yesterday's problem. We haven't discussed anything about the closure, but everybody understood what is the problem. How do we create an external library? Anyone? Any questions? No questions, right?
Sir, how to call the external library in our code?
Just like an external JS file, simply script src whatever the JS path wherever you have. Either it could be a global URL or private URL or relative path or absolute path, simply as like a normal JS file. That's what I said, right? When I say a library, nothing much new. It's like an external JS file. That's it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So let us see. Okay, this is one of the part. Let us independently talk about the closure. Okay, I call it as okay. Let us talk independently about the closure, like what is closure and all. Then I will tell you what is the advantage we have with your closure, how you can solve the previous problem with the closure. Okay. So the very first thing is, I say, guys, put some extra attention. This is one of the very important topic of your JavaScript, closures. Okay, this is how you're going to add the data security, etc. stuff. Okay. Now I say one of the function, something called as a function. Okay, something called a show message. Say something called console.log hello all. So what is this? Is it a function definition or a function calling?
Definition, sir.
Definition or a function calling? I want
Definition.
Definition.
definition. Super fine. Now I say show message. What is this by? Is it the definition or calling of the function?
Calling of the
Calling
of the function.
Calling.
In general, whenever you define a normal function, you need to define the function, you need to invoke the function. Now what I want to do is, I want to define an anonymous function. Everybody know what do you mean by anonymous function? Function without any name, we call it as anonymous function. Now I would like to say this guy and this guy. Okay. Under this, I mean, here if you have message function name and open brace, close brace. So instead of this function name, I simply put a function definition over here. Like this. That's it. This is what we call it as anonymous function, and this is what we call it as completely a closure. Okay, so what is the difference between these two functions here? First thing, this function is having a name. This function is not having a name. This function has to be called manually. You need to invoke this guy by calling at line number 16. That method gets invoked. But in this case, you are not calling this function. This function gets called automatically. Okay, guys, just give me a second. Yeah, sorry guys. Okay, so what are we doing here? We are actually defining the function and we are actually invoking the function here. But now in this case, what we are doing is we are defining the function and calling the function at a time. Okay, we are defining the function and calling the function at a time. So whenever you do this, at the line number 18, it is equal to calling a function and defining a function. Now, if you see, when I comment out these guys, come back here, open inside the browser. Now, if you inspect this guy, go to the console, you see hello all is coming. So here we are not calling this guy, but it is a calling and manually invoking this guy. As simple as it is. This is what we call it as a closure. Any questions on the syntax? Anyone? Only the syntax part.
Sir, could you once repeat how it gets invoked?
Sorry, voice is not audible. Can you please repeat it again? Someone asked me a question. Hello.
Sir, could you once repeat how to invoke the function?
It is not how to invoke a function. It is how do we define a function, right? Now, whenever I say closure, a closure means open the brace, close the brace, and with a semicolon. This first guy should be the function name. As I don't have the function name, give the body there itself. Some function, just something like this. Now, whatever the message you want to show, I mean, not only message or whatever the piece of code you want to give, you can simply add it. This is what a closure is. Next, any other questions?
How can I pass the parameters on this anonymous function?
Okay, in this case, if you say there is a global variable, something called as var a is equal to 90. Now, what you can do, you can simply say a here, and that guy will be coming or a here. Now, when I say hello all plus a, this will be getting the value of a.
Global variable also support this.
I mean, yeah, obviously. I mean, when I say global variable, anywhere within the code, you can access it, right? When I say global variable, doesn't matter whether it is a closure or a normal function, wherever it is, you could able to access the global data, right?
In closure, it make more secure. That's why
I will talk about this. I mean, right now I only talked about the definition of the closure. Now I will tell you how do we add data inside the closure, how do you make it secure. We'll discuss about this.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone with
Sir,
the syntax?
Sir, how to call this anonymous function because it's not my name?
That is what we call it as anonymous function, right? A function without name is called as anonymous function. As we have mentioned the open and close braces over here, it will be automatically invoked here. It will be automatically called. You don't need to call it manually.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir, from line number 18 to 20, total means we call it closure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, from 18 to 18 to
Okay.
means,
This is the function body and this is the function calling. That is the reason a closure is self-invoked function. You're not calling it. Automatically when the controller reaches it, it automatically gets invoked.
okay, sir, in closure we are using anonymous function.
Not actually, we can say. In general, if you see any of the function without a name, any array without a name, we simply call it as anonymous. As we see this function without a name, we simply call it as anonymous function. And this is even a definition, or this is even a syntax for closure also.
Thank you.
Sir, can I call this anonymous function anywhere in the place?
No, right? If you don't have the name, you can't invoke it anywhere you wanted. When
It will call immediately after the function, right?
Sorry, Robin?
It will be called immediately after declaring.
Exactly. When the controller reaches to it, I will get immediately called. There is no option that you have to manually, you get a chance to manually invoke it. No option.
A nested anonymous function can I do?
Yeah, obviously. Inside the function, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. Inside this function, you define another function, you define another anonymous function. It's up to you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now, what is the advantage we have with your closure? Let us have a look on this. Okay. So what is the, okay, you said that, okay, this is what the definition and body of the function, which is getting invoked automatically. Super fine. The advantage is whatever the data you define inside this. Now I say a equal to 90. And inside this guy, I say console.log. The value of a is plus a. Now, if you save this guy, come back here and reload the page. Yes, I could able to access the value of a. If you try to put the same value outside of the closure, now if you reload this page, it is not accessible. Okay, whatever the data you define inside a closure, it is going to be a private data within the closure, and not just only the variables. You define another function, something called as some sample. Okay, I say console.log am from sample. Okay, so how do you invoke this guy? I say something called as sample. Now, if you come back here, let me comment out this guy. As we saw that it is not working. Now, if you reload the page, see, am from sample is coming. Okay, very good. But now, if I try to invoke this sample guy outside of it, now if you come back and reload this page, it simply says that sample is not defined. Boss, within the same application, within the same code, you cannot access the data. Now you define an object, say some var data equal to some object. You define a class some ABC. So whatever the data, what you define inside the closure will all become the private data, cannot be accessible outside of the closure. Now, if I say var a is equal to 99, do you feel that this a at line number 16, at line number 14, aren't they same?
No, sir.
No,
They are
sir.
not same, because this is a global variable a, and inside the closure, this a is completely different. Okay. So any questions on this? So we are actually adding the security of the piece of code, not just only the variables on the statements. You can define any of the JavaScript code. You create a classes, you create an object, you create anything within this callback function, it will automatically become the closure data, can only be accessible within the closure, not outside of the closure. Okay. Any questions?
Sir, is this closure function calling itself by itself?
Yeah, sorry, ma'am. What is your question? Could you repeat it again?
Is this closure function calling by itself?
Closure means a self-invoked function itself is called as a closure. A function which is getting invoked automatically, we call that guy itself as a closure.
What's the benefit? Sir, I've got a question. What's the benefit of having such a system where basically, other than security, what benefit does it have?
The main advantage or the main reason closure have come into the picture is not just giving the security to a particular function. Now, when you say you take a normal function, you define the data that becomes local, and that data cannot be accessible. Now you define a separate class, you define a separate function. Now, what if I have a piece of code, a piece of JavaScript code, a piece of a JavaScript file content? Now, how do you add the security to the complete file content? Define every other thing within the closure, the security has been added. The main reason and the only intention of going for the closure is binding the relative information of a particular relative code and providing the data security. Am I clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let us take the same guy.
This bracket is a closure, sir.
Sorry, Shankar, could you please repeat again?
It's brackets. What you have written a code is a closure.
Line number? You mean to say this guy?
Yes, sir. I am saying line number 15 to 29. What are the given a bracket is a closure, sir.
Yes, the data inside this guy is, okay, let me tell you more clearly. Okay, in general, whenever you call a function, how do you do? Say something called as add values. This is what we do. This is like calling a function. Because you have a variable which is holding a function and you put this open and close braces to call that guy. Now what I'm saying, I don't have a name. Now I simply put open braces and call this guy. As I don't have the name, under this guy, you simply define a function, open braces, something like this. Now this will become a closure. Automatically, this guy will be invoked. Okay, whenever the controller comes to line number 5, it automatically gets invoked by initializing all this data. Now, whatever the data you define inside this body, this is called as a closure. From line number 5 to 9, it is a closure, which is holding some piece of code. And this data, what you give is a secure data, cannot be accessible outside of the closure.
Hello, sir.
1 second. Shankar, are you clear with the question?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Yeah. Shreyas, please go ahead.
Sir, we have seen while using the DHTML that many times we have got to call the function from the HTML code. But sir, for closure, we cannot call the function. Then how is it of
Shreyas,
advantage to us?
Very, very awesome. That's a very good observation. So what Shreyas is saying is, okay, boss, you are defining every other thing within the closure. Then in case of your normal functions, you need to invoke the data, right? Then if you couldn't able to invoke the data, either it is a method or object or so and so, what is the use? That's a very, very, very good observation, Shreyas. I really appreciate your question. So everybody understood what actually that question means?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Got it, right? Now I'm defining this function sample. Now what is this question is, okay, boss, I don't want to invoke the sample here. I want to invoke the sample guy when the user is clicking on the button, or forget about this. Now I want to invoke the function at line number 32. Then how do you do this? So that is where there is a way you have to access the data that I will go step by step. I'll show you. So very first thing what I want to show you for you guys is the very first problem what we see with our closure, our previous code. What was that? This guy is using a count variable. As a developer of the API or the library, I use the variable called as count. And you guys, as a application developer, you also use the count to not to get a conflict between this code. Can I put all my library code inside a closure? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Can put it, right? To not to get a disturbance of you guys. Now what I'll say, I'll simply open a braces, close a braces, and with a semicolon, the first guy goes with something like this. Now I take out this guy, put all the code within the closure, and with a brace. That's it. My job is done. Now, is there any relation between this count variable and this count variable? Not at all. This guy is not a global variable. This guy is a global variable. So this count is completely different. Now, if you come back to your application, let us come back to this guy, JS closures again. Okay, now I have, earlier we had that count problem. Okay, but now I say something like 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Now, when I click on do addition, you see the very first problem, what are we getting is, it is saying that add values is not defined. How can it say that add values is not defined? Because in my HTML, let me clear out these guys. Closure, demo sample is gone. Okay. Yeah. In my HTML, I have included the math.util.js or math operation util.js, but here I'm trying to access the add values. It is saying that add values is not defined, but add values is already there, right? Why the reason it is saying that it is not defined? Why the reason it is saying that it is not defined?
It's in closure. In a closure.
Because it is a part of a closure. The data, what you define within the closure cannot be accessible outside. Then how do I access this data? Then what is the reason I'm putting into the closure? Okay, boss, I have added this closure so that I can put the data secured so that whatever the data I define, it cannot get conflict with the developer's code. But if the data itself is can't usable by the end user, what is the reason that I'm putting into the closure? That is the reason we have some steps using which you could able to access the closure data outside of the closure. Okay, we have some set of steps using which you could able to access the data. Either it could be a variable, either it could be a method, either it could be object, anything, whatever you have, you could able to access the data outside of the particular closure. Okay, so how do I do that? So in order to access this data outside of the closure, I simply do 3 steps here. The very first step is assign a name to closure. Okay, first step is assign a name to the closure. What I'm doing is put a name to this guy. I say where math util is equal to so and so. Just I'm putting a name. Now if you come back and reload the page, I give some value 78 so and so 89. When I click on do addition, no boss, still add values is not defined. So just step 1 is not enough. First step is I'm assigning a name to the closure. The second step is return an object from closure. Okay, you have to return an object from the closure. Where is the ending of this closure? This is where it is. As it is a function, can I say that return an object here? Yes or no? I can return a value from a function,
Yes, sir,
right?
yes,
Remember,
sir.
we already saw that, returning values
Yes,
from the
sir.
function. Now, whatever the object you return, that will be taken by this variable, whatever you have taken. Okay, fine. Now, what is the use of this guy? The third step is under the return object, add methods and properties which should be accessible outside of closure. As simple as it is. Okay, so what I'm saying is in the third step, under the return object, whatever you're doing, you simply add the methods and properties which should be accessible outside of the closure. So I mean, say for example, I say test, say something called as, or I say name. My name is something called as Prasad. Right now it is part of the closure. If at all you want to access the name, you know what we do? We make use of the closure name. Okay, let us say console dot log. I use the closure name dot name, I will say. Now if you come back and reload the page, when I click on do addition, do you see the Prasad name is coming? Actually, name Prasad has been declared within the closure. Could I able to access the data outside of the closure? Yes. Why so? I have added the data within the return object. In the same way, if at all you have to access the add values method, you know what I'll do? I'll simply make this add values as a part of return object. I simply put this guy, this as a name, comma, add values, this guy is colon, as simple as it is. Now if you save this guy, come back here, reload the page. I give some 2, I give some 23. When I click on do addition, still it is saying like add value is not defined. Why so? Still it is saying add values is not defined. Why so? Come on, can anyone? Come on. Why your voice is low today? I mean, problem with my machine or? Yeah, someone is saying an answer. Can you please a bit louder, please? Exactly.
We have to add the
Whenever
value.
you are trying to access the data from the closure, you need to say closure name dot add values. Now, if you save this guy, come back here, reload the page. I say first value, say some 23, second value, say some 43, do addition. My count variable is not getting disturbed. At the same time, I could able to invoke the add values. This is how you can access the data of the closure outside of the closure also. And one main thing what you see is you are not exposing all the data what you have within the closure. You are only exposing the data what you wanted for the end user. You might define some 1,000 methods, but whatever the method which you are defining inside this written object, that is what end user can access. Now, if you see, when I click on do subtraction, it is simply saying like subtraction is not at all defined. Then how do I solve that guy? I need to take subtraction values. What is that? This is what the subtraction value is. Let us take out this guy. It has to be part of the return object. Come on, man. Control. Okay, I simply do this. Now, if you come back, reload the page. I give some 34. I give some 44. Click on to addition. Addition is happening. Click on subtraction. Subtraction is again not happening. Why so?
Give the method. Math utility.
Object
utility.
name, the closure name dot. Anytime you want to access the data from the closure, it has to be closure name dot so and so. Okay, now if I come back, reload the
You
page,
added it to the
I say enter the value.
You added it to the
Sorry, what I did?
Multiplication you added, sir.
multiplication. You added it.
Oh, sorry. It has to be for subtraction, right? Yes. Okay, now if you come back and reload the page, I give some 33, 44. Okay. I click on do addition. Addition is happening. I click on do subtraction. Subtraction is also happening. And easier count is getting disturbed? No. Even though both of you, the developer guy and the API library provider, both are using the same name, but still you're not having any type of conflicts here. This is what we call it as, or this is what the advantage we have with your closure. And another way, right now, what you have done, you're just defining the definitions of add values and subtraction here, right? Another way, what you can do is, say, for example, multiplication values is there. Okay, what I can do, I can put something like this, multiply values. Okay, object is some a1 comma a2 or 2. Okay, under this, I can simply say return multi values a1 comma a2. This is also, it can also be done. Okay, what you're doing is you are internally invoking your own method. MUL values is not accessible. Now from outside, can I say mathUtil.mul values? Can I do this? Can I say mathUtil.mul values? No,
Yes,
no,
sir.
no. Why so? In the return, we are returning add values, sub values, and multiply values is the one what we have done. Internally, that guy is calling MUL values. Okay, now if you see, I can say multiply values here. Now, if you save this guy, come back here, reload the page. I say 88, 89, do multiplication. Multiplication is coming, subtraction is coming, addition is coming. But when I say division, it is not coming. Why so? You are not exposing the division value. So only the data what you expose to outside, that is what will be accessible from the outside world. Otherwise, it will not be accessible. This is how you are providing the security to your code. At the same time, you are providing an option for the end user to access what he wanted. This is what we call it as closures. Any time in the universe, whoever create the JavaScript library, everyone has to put their code within the closure. Why the reason? Because everyone don't want to get a duplication of the code. Everyone don't want to make a conflict with the end user code. That is the reason. But here, earlier, when I was giving the library, I was giving a I mean, when I'm giving the library to you guys, I was giving some conditions to you saying that, boss, don't use this count variable, don't use this method, that method. Now, do I need to put the conditions or still I need to, I mean, or do I don't need to put the condition?
Don't need to
Don't
put
need
the
to.
condition.
Come on, I still need to put a condition. What is that? Just give me a second, guys. 1 second. Okay. Yeah, sorry, guys. What I was saying is still I need to put a condition. What was that? Do I need to say that? Now you tell me, math util variable or the closure name, is it is a public data or private data?
Public data.
Public data.
Public.
It is
Public.
public data. Anytime I'm creating any of the library, in general, I'm saying, guys, in JavaScript world, anytime you create a library, every library data will be passed or will be kept under the closure. And for that closure, there will be a user defined name will be given. Okay. And anytime you want to access the data from the particular closure, we use it through the closure name. Okay. And anytime you're making use of any of the library, for sure, they will come up and say that, boss, this is the closure name. Under the closure, I may define thousands of variables, thousands of methods. You can use the same method name, same variable name, not at all impact. But please don't make use of the same closure name. In your code, if you put any of the variable like math util, like if you say, I say var, you use the same variable var math util, come on. Okay, I say var math util is equal to say some 90, something you have given. Are you using the same variable name? Gone. You cannot make use of the library now. That is all overwritten. So anytime you create a library using the closure, you still give one of the restriction. That is the closure name through which you access all the data from the particular library. Like for example, if you go for jQuery, there is something called as dollar and jQuery are the two object names. So like this, any of the library you go, this is what the restriction you will be getting. So now you understood what is closure and what are the advantages you're getting with the closure?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I have got a doubt.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So, what is the difference between the JSON, which has a function which is also secured, and this closure?
The reason why we go with the JSON, okay, let us say this is the util method, okay, or else I want to define a closure for both employee details. I want to define something like this. Okay. And you can even define the arrow function also, guys. If you want to make it as an arrow function, you know that, right? Instead of function, you simply say like this. Okay. Yeah. Now, what is your question is, boss, in a JSON also, you will group the data with all the properties and methods. In a JSON object, can you define a class? I want to define one of the class. I want to define an object. Now, let us say I have a class, say some student details. Okay. Under this, I'm going to define some class data. I have another class. I have another class, which is employee details. Okay. Some piece of code. I have some var user info. As another JSON object, I have var name equal to say some Tina. Okay. I have some var marks equal to some array of some values. You tell me, can I put all of this inside one of the JSON object? Can I secure this data using a JSON object?
I'm not sure with class can be inside a JSON.
That's it, right? We cannot give it, right? Now, if at all I want to secure this data,
Okay.
simply take out this, keep it inside the closure. My job is done. Got it,
So,
Pravita?
isn't it like a class is inside a function? Like inside anonymous function?
You can have it, right? You can define the class any way you want it. There is never a restriction.
Okay.
But the only thing is accessibility level of the class is only under this function, not outside of the function.
Sir, I've got a question.
1 second, Raj. Pravita, are you done with all your questions, or I mean I still see question mark on your answers?
Yeah, it's I got it. No, I understood. Yeah, I got it.
Very good. Yeah, Raj, please go ahead.
What if I want to have inheritance of closure objects?
What if you want to have inheritance of closure object? If you clearly see closure object is a normal object as it is. Now, if you console these guy, console.log math_util, okay. If you see here, reload the page. Do you see any different type of structuring, etc. and all? No, right? It is simply an object again, having all the data in the form of key value pairs. As simple as it is. Now you have another data, some details. Details dot underscore prototype equal to math_util. You can do all the same.
Okay, but you just can't access the data inside from outside.
That's it.
Okay.
Any more
sir,
questions?
So within the closure, we can have only one anonymous function, or we can have a multiple anonymous function.
You just said that you are done with all the questions, ma'am.
Now
Fine,
I
yeah.
got
Go ahead.
it.
It's okay. I'm just kidding. Yeah, tell me, ma'am. Could you repeat your question again?
Like inside a open and close braces, we are having a one anonymous function. It is like it is mandatory that we have only one anonymous, or can we have a multiple
Obviously
anonymous
one, right?
function
The
inside?
syntax itself.
Okay.
Can you call multiple functions at a time? Now I have add values is one of the method. Can you say multiply values, something like this at a time? Can you do this? Yes or no,
No.
Pradeep?
Okay.
No, that's it. As simple as it is. It's like it's
No,
indirectly a
we
function
can't.
call. Instead of function name, you have a function definition. That's it.
Okay.
Next,
Okay.
more questions?
So, sir, if a user uses this library, so will he be able to view that classes what are present inside the closure?
That's a good question, Abhinav. Now, say for example, you are using my library. Okay. Now, for example, I'm I'm the guy just exploring your application. What I'll do, I'll simply go to the source code. When you click on this math_util.js, could you able to see whatever the definition you're giving? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now, that is the reason. Now, you may ask me a question, boss, then there is a security problem, right? I mean,